In this video, we are going to create a project to learn how to use .NET for Apache Spark to read various file types like JSON, CSV, or even read data from a database, a classical RDBMS. So first, let's start with character separated files. I'm already here in Visual Studio. I will create a new project. Console app.net. Next, let's call it getting data, place blah blah. Now it's created. Let's create this. Okay. Right now, this is just a classic .NET Core console app. So first, let us set up Apache Spark for this project. For this, we are going to add some dependencies. The name is Spark. Browse. Check for it. Spark. Microsoft Spark. Install. Accept the license. And there you go. Now our project is ready. So the first thing we are going to do as we are here in a Spark application, the first thing we need is a Spark session. So I'm going to remove this hello world stuff. Now let's save our Spark session equal Spark session suck. Using Microsoft Spark.sql. Builder, get or create. Now we have our Spark session. The Spark session is the entry point of all functions in a Spark program. So the next thing we need to do is to read a file. So to read a file, we need the method read from the Spark session, and this looks like this. Let's say var csv file equal Spark session dot read dot. So now the read method returns a data frame reader. A data frame reader allows you to read data and return a data frame It also exposes a lot of functions. As you can see, there's a CSV method to directly read comma separated files. So in case you have a file where the values are already separated using a comma, you can directly use the CSV method. But if this is not the case, like in the example or in the files I'm going to use, then you must use the format method to then specify all options manually. So first, let's start by seeing how this works. So after reading this, as you can see, we get a data frame reader back, and you can see here, this is the data frame reader class, and it has a method format, specifies the input of the data source. So data frame.format. Let's go back to Visual Studio. The format is CSV for characters separated. Now dot read dot format dot. After specifying the format, we must tell the data frame what character is being used to separate the difference value. We are using a file where each value is separated by a vertical bar. Let me show you the file. I should have it somewhere here. Inventory.dat. So the file looks like this. We are using a vertical bar to separate each value. Just information about the file. This is a file that represents the inventory of a fictive retailer. Each row in the file represents the quantity of a particular item. So the item ID is this one at a given warehouse during a specific day. So this is ID of the warehouse, and this is the quantity of the item. So the ID of the date, the ID of the item, the ID of the warehouse, and the quantity of the item at hand. So now in a typical comma separate file, you will have something like this, where each value is comma separated like this. But for this example, it's best if you first learn how to specify every option manually when you have character separated values. So we are going to use this file in our example. So let's set it up in Visual Studio. So to specify the delimiter, so the character used to separate values, we must use the options method to specify multiple values. This method takes a dictionary of string as parameter. So what I will do now, I will create the dictionary as a separate thing. So let me create a different variable for this. Var options equal new dictionary string. So now we pass in the first parameter, delimiter. Set it was the vertical bar. Now we can pass our dictionary in here. Options. So we call the read method, we specify the format, a character separated values, we pass in an options to specify different options for the file. Let's take a look at the original documentation of the options method. I guess it's somewhere here, options. Here you can see we can pass in different parameter or option to the options method. So a separator or delimiter, the default is the comma, or we can also specify if the file contains a header or not, or if we want the schema of the file to be inferred, or we want to specify the schema ourselves. But for this schema specification, we will see how to do it later. So this is where you can see all you can pass in. instead of using Delimiter here as we did, we could also just use sep and it will have the same effect. But I like this one, Delimiter. So after specifying the format and the options, now we can load the file by specifying the path where the file is located. In my case, on my machine, the file is located at the C drive somewhere there. Let me just put this here. So this is the file location. So this is all what's necessary to read a generic file using the format method. So now let's verify if everything works fine. To do this, we can first csv.print schema to print the schema of the file, or csv file dot or show the first 5 lines of our file. Let me save this, build it. Okay, everything built fine. Now let me cd into the output directory. I think it's bin debug. Yep, there we are. ls. Yep. Now let's run it. I know the name of my file is getting data.dll. Oops, there's an error here, getting main. God, which one? Format, options, read. There's an error here. cdef. Let me check this again. What? cdef. Yep. Let me build it again. What is this? Non-static method call. What am I missing here? Read, format, CSV option, load, delimiter, print schema. My bad. I think it's because of this thing. Yeah. Build it. There was a nasty error here. And run it again. Yep, Now you can see Apache Spark then went through the file, and the schema is the default one where every value is considered to be a string value, as you can see here. And then we then print out the first 5 rows in the file. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As you can see, these are the same values we should have here, but these are just random values, so it just randomly pick 5 out of the data frame. This is not even the real file. Let me check this. Don't save. Suck. Dev. TPCDS 1 GB. Inventory. Boom. That. Yeah. Edit. Now you can see here we print the first 5 lines, and the output is gone. Mono. Yep, there we are. The first 5 lines of the file, and here also the first 5 lines. So this is how you can easily read a character separated file using Apache Spark for .NET. Keep in mind that all these options and all accepted arguments to those options can be found on the official Apache Spark documentation. Even if it was written for Scala or Python, I think you can easily find a way to understand what are the necessary parameters. Now, let's look at the schema again. Here, you can see that by default, Apache Spark just assumes that every character in our file, that every value in our file has the data type string. This may be convenient if you just want to inspect the value in a file, but if you want to do further processing with the data frame later, you really want to have the real data types here, because you don't want later to be dividing string by integers and stuff like that. This is the bad road. So now let's see how to specify the real schema for our file. The data frame reader exposed a method called schema, where you can pass in a schema in form of a data definition language string. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it is a language used in the database programming to define the data type and the shape of every column. So here's even the Wikipedia page on it. Data definition, data description language is a syntax to a computer programming language for defining data structure, especially database schemas. So this is how it almost looks like. You enter the name of the column, the data type, name of the column, the data type, or how big it should be. So this is how it looks. If you are interested, please take a look at the Wikipedia page, data definition language. In our case, what we need to pass in a schema, a DDL. So what I'm going to do right now, I will create a variable called schema string equal, then pass it in here. What I need here, equal suck. pass in a schema string. So what we know for sure is that in our file, the first value is the ID of a specific date and is of type integer. The second one also, the third one is also an integer, but the quantity, the last one, is a string. So we are going to specify that using a DDL string. So first character is the inventory date, is of type integer. The second one is the inventory item ID, is also of type integer. The third one is the warehouse, so the inventory warehouse ID is also of type integer. And the last one is the inventory quantity on. And this is of type string. So I have the date, integer, and string. Let me write everything like this. So let me save it, build it. So before the changes, when we print the schema, we had this. Let me copy it also and just put it somewhere. Looks like this. Now let's run it again. Now you can see that after we then run print schema, here print schema, we've got real column names and the type we know is the right one. So this is how you can pass in a data description language string or data definition language string. I quite use a mismatch, but yeah, a data definition language string. You pass it like that. This is just one option of how to use the real schema to define a schema. The second one is to pass in an option to specify, to ask Apache Spark to infer the schema. The option name is quite simple. You pass in infer schema and set true. And then you don't have to use this one. So instead of specifying the schema manually, you can ask Apache Spark to do schema inference for you. This works great in most cases, but if you know, for example, that a specific value in your file is not of type string but of type integer, then you may be better off specifying the schema manually. Let's take a short view into the infer schema option, because I think it's a great one. Infer schema. So the infer schema is disabled by default, and here it states infers the input schema automatically from data, but it also requires one extra pass of the data. So automatic schema inference also comes with a little bit of performance cost. The sampling ratio, defines the fraction of rows you use for schema inferring. So if you want to have the best schema, the best result as possible, you should increase this value. So let us do it by passing what's the name, sampling ratio. Let's first use the default one. Build this thing and run it. It just briefly ignore that I have a typo here, but as you can see also right now it did schema inference and decide that the first 4 columns are of type, that all 4 columns are of type integer, which is not right because the last column doesn't really exist. Let's take a look into the file. As you can see, this last column doesn't have any value. It's just that at the end of the file we have a delimiter, so it assumes that there's an additional value here, which is not the case. That's why it's saying everything in the file is integer and the last one is a string because it's just an empty string. But we have prior knowledge about our file. That's why we said it only have 1, 2, 3, 4 column, because the last one is not a real column, and we give it what are the real value. And in that case, we knew that the first 3 one are integer and the 4th one is a string. Also, when you use schema inference, as you can see, you don't have real column names, but kind of shorthand, column 0, column 1, column 2, and column 3. But it also works very well. Let's see how this sampling ratio worked. Never used it before, so let's test it together. Sampling ratio, what's the name, right? Sampling ratio. Don't want to make the same mistake twice. Copy and paste. 50, build it, and run it. Yeah, so the result is almost the same. The 4 columns are also of type integer. So this is how you can specify the schema or infer the schema. To do it manually, pass in the schema string, or you can just let Apache Spark do it for yourself by passing in the option infer schema or setting the option infer schema to true. So with the format and the load method, we can read generic files because the both method offers all freedoms to specify how you want to read how your file is structured and how it should be read. The documentation of it can be found on the Apache Spark page, generic load and save method, where you can really read it, even if it is in Scala, Java, and not C#. I think if you have basic understanding or even minimal understanding of C#, you should be able to understand what is happening here. So till now, I've been using a file where we had this delimiter with a vertical bar. This was just to show you how you can specify all this stuff manually. But let's say you have a real file with comma separated values, one like this one. Let me show you. This is a real CSV file. You can see the first row is the header, where I just put some names in there, and this is how it looks like. Let's say we want to read this file using Apache Spark for .NET. There's no reason to save it. You can even open it with Notepad++, and then you can really see every value, every field in the file is comma separated, and the first one is the header. So let's do this. First, I will just comment this out, and then what we are going to do here, var CSV file equals spark session dot read dot CSV. Now you have the CSV file method. It take the path to the file. You can also, then I will just copy this because I know where the file lies. It's there, man, not this thing again. So the CSV file, and CSV file, and we are really done. So I can do it like that. Print the schema, build it, and run it. There you are. The same thing with Schema Inference. Everything per default is supposed to be a string. The column name have no meaning. Column 0, 1, 2, 3. So our 4 columns. But there's one thing you can see here. The first row in the file was also taken as being a value, but we know that this first row is the header, so we must tell the read method that the first row in our file is the header. So we will use the option method, but this time we are not going to use the option dictionary, but we are just going to specify single options. So header. There's also a method called options with different overloads, key value, string, key double. So we are going to use this one, the header, and so the first row is header. Good. Save this, build this, and run this. Now you can see the difference. On the first run, without telling the data frame reader that the first row in the file is the header, we got something like that. On the second run, after specifying that the first row is the header, we get something like that, which is more convenient to work with. But there's still something here you have to take care of. Everything is still supposed to be a string, so we are going to pass in a second option to tell him to infer the schema. So infer schema is also true. So build it and run it. So you can use all options you have been using before with the CSV method. Just remember that you cannot apply this on a data frame, but on a data frame reader. As you can see here, the CSV method returns a data frame, but the read method returns a data frame reader. So that's why even if you want to specify a schema manually, we must put it here and not here, because from here you can't. You have a property schema here, but not a method called schema. So what we can do here, where's the schema string? Let me cut this from here, put it here. So infer schema should work as before, exactly as. Let me build this and run it again. Now that we set infer schema, everything is now integer because all value look like integers. We can also specify the schema manually by using the schema method and passing in the schema string. The result will be the same as before. Yeah, so we already know what this looks like, so I will not run this one again, although why not. Let's take a look. While this is running, I really encourage you to go to the original Apache Spark documentation and take a look at what's possible and what's not. Remember that Apache Spark for .NET is a wrapper with W around these APIs. So if you want to know how a data frame reader works, take some minutes, half an hour, take a look around, see what's possible and what's not, and explore what the .NET API is already exposing. Yep, now you can see after specifying the schema manually, it works the same as before. So this is how you can use Apache Spark for .NET to read files with character separated values. See you next time.